The trap snapped, and she screamed. Mason was not a cruel man. He was just trying to survive. After his ship crashed on the wild alien planet called Viralia, he had no choice but to live off the land. His food supplies were gone. His radio was broken. The trees were tall and thick, and strange animals moved in the dark. He built a small shelter and set traps, simple ones made of wire and sharp sticks. He was hungry, and tired, and alone. That morning, the forest was silent. Too silent. Then, "It happened! Snap!" A trap triggered. Mason heard it echo through the trees. He stood quickly, grabbed his handmade spear, and rushed toward the sound. He hoped it wasn't another empty catch. Last time he found only a broken branch. This time, he hoped for meat, but what he found made him stop cold. It was not an animal. It was a girl. Her skin was a soft purple. Her hair was long and white, falling like silk across her dirty face. She wore scraps of cloth, torn and muddy. The wire trap had caught her ankle, and sharp thorns from the trap had pierced her leg. Blood, greenish and thick, was running down. She looked up at him and screamed. The sound wasn't just fear, it was terror. Like she thought he was a monster. Mason stood frozen. He raised his hands slowly. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently. Of course she didn't understand. Her eyes grew wider at his voice. She curled into herself, pulling her knees close even though it made the pain worse. Her thin body shook. She was trembling like a leaf in the wind. She pointed at her mouth. Then her stomach, then at Mason's spear. He didn't get it at first, then he realized she thought he was going to eat her. Mason felt a cold weight in his chest. He dropped the spear and took a slow step back. "I won't eat you," he whispered. Though it didn't matter. She didn't know the words. Her chest was rising and falling fast. She looked around, panicking, then reached into her little satchel. Mason took another step back, unsure what she was doing. She pulled out something round and bright blue, a fruit. She held it out to him with shaking hands. She bowed her head low to the ground and pushed the fruit toward him again, like she was offering it in trade. Mason's heart sank. She was offering food, so he wouldn't eat her. "No," he said softly. "No, you don't have to. I won't hurt you." He knelt near her slowly and reached for the trap. She flinched, covering her face, but he was gentle. He pressed a button to release the wire. It snapped open. Her ankle was bleeding badly. Her skin was soft, bruised. She didn't run. She just looked at him, unsure. "I need to help your leg," he said. "Bandage. Medicine." Again, she didn't understand, but she watched him carefully as he tore his own shirt into strips and wrapped her wound. She didn't stop him. For a long moment, they just sat there. Birds began to sing again in the trees. The wind moved gently. He noticed something strange. She had no fangs, no claws. Her teeth were flat, like a deer's. Her fingers were long and soft, not made for fighting. She was clearly herbivorous, a plant eater, harmless. And yet, someone had taught her that creatures like him, meat eaters, were dangerous. Was she alone out here? Was someone chasing her? Had others hunted her kind? He didn't know. But he knew one thing for sure. She was scared of him, terrified, and he couldn't stand that. "I'm not your enemy," he whispered. Her big, glowing eyes stared at him. Slowly, she placed the fruit in his lap, as if still unsure whether he would demand something in return. He didn't eat it. Instead, he picked it up and gently handed it back. Her lips parted in surprise. Then for the first time, her eyes blinked without fear. The alien girl did not sleep, even after Mason helped her out of the trap. Even after he gave her clean water, even after he wrapped her leg. She sat near the edge of his camp under a low-hanging tree, watching him with wide, unblinking eyes. Her arms were wrapped around her knees. She didn't talk, didn't move, didn't cry, but fear covered her like a thick blanket. Mason pretended not to notice. He didn't want to scare her again. He moved slowly around the camp, collecting firewood, checking his gear, sharpening a stick, but he could feel her eyes on him every second. She was waiting for something, waiting for him to become the monster she thought he was. That night, as the sun sank behind the red hills, Mason started a small fire. The flames rose gently. The forest sounds faded, insects buzzed, and shadows moved between the trees. The alien girl flinched when the fire cracked. He held up his hands and said softly, "It's just wood, just fire, not for you." But she didn't understand his words. He sighed, then turned to his bag. Inside was his last piece of dried meat. He'd been saving it, but now he had no choice. He opened the packet and tossed it into a pan over the fire. The smell of sizzling meat rose into the air. Suddenly, he heard a soft gasp. He turned. She was staring at the meat with pure horror. Her purple face turned pale. Her hands covered her mouth, her body shook like a leaf in the wind, and then she crawled backward. "No, no, no," Mason said quickly, standing up and holding his hands out. But it was too late. She scrambled away from the fire like a frightened animal. Her legs still hurt, gave out. She fell, cried out. Still, she pushed herself back with her hands away from the flames and the scent of cooking flesh. Mason dropped the pan and ran to her. She hissed and covered her head, expecting a blow. But Mason knelt beside her and gently placed a blanket over her shoulders. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. Her eyes peeked out, wide, wet. He reached into his pack and pulled out something else, a small fruit she had given him earlier. He handed it to her. She looked at the fruit, then at him. She took it slowly, shaking. He sat beside her far enough not to scare her more. "Meat is for me." "Not you," he said, tapping his chest. "Fruit is for you." He didn't know if she understood, but she nodded once, just once. The fire crackled behind them. Then, something changed. She crawled a little closer to the dirt and used her finger to draw a picture. Mason watched carefully. It showed two figures, one large with sharp teeth, chasing a smaller figure with long hair. Then she pointed to the big figure, then to him. Mason froze. Her people had seen something like him before. Or maybe they had been hunted by something that looked like him. Worse. Maybe humans had been here. She thought he was one of them. The meat, the teeth, the fire. To her, it all meant death. Mason felt sick. He had saved her, yes, but in her eyes he was still a predator, still the enemy. He looked into her eyes and tapped his own heart. "Not bad," he said. "Not a killer, just a man." But she only stared. He stood slowly, walked back to the fire, and this time threw the rest of the meat into the flames. It sizzled and burned to ash. He looked over his shoulder. She watched. Her eyes widened. And for the first time, she relaxed. Not fully, but a little. She crawled to the edge of the firelight and sat down, hugging her knees again. But this time she did not shake, she did not cry. Mason sat across from her, not too close. He pointed to himself. Mason then pointed to her. She didn't answer. He tried again. "Mason. Point. You?" She stared at him, then slowly tapped her chest. "Ella." He smiled. "Ella." She blinked. He said it again, softer. "Ella." Then pointed to the stars above. "Safe. Safe." She looked up. She didn't smile, but her shoulders lowered. That night, Ella stayed beside the fire. She didn't sleep, but she watched the flames without fear, and Mason didn't cook any more meat. Mason was a light sleeper. Out here in a jungle full of things with claws and teeth, sleep was always half alert. Every crack of a branch, every flutter of wings in the dark. It woke him. But this time, the sound was different. It wasn't danger. It was soft, wet. A quiet sound, like someone breathing through tears. Mason opened his eyes. The fire was low now, just glowing embers. His shelter, just a roof of branches and tarp, kept the cold away, but only barely. He sat up slowly, eyes scanning the area. Then he saw her, Ayla. She wasn't lying near the fire like before. She was sitting behind the old supply crates, knees pulled to her chest back to the wall. Her head was bowed low, and though she made almost no sound, her body shook with silent cries. Mason felt a deep ache in his chest. She hadn't cried when she was caught in the trap. Not even when the thorns tore her skin. But now, in the middle of the quiet night, she cried. Alone. Carefully, he grabbed his blanket and moved toward her. He didn't speak, just sat near her, far enough not to frighten her. She looked up. Surprised, her eyes were red and full of tears. She wiped them quickly, ashamed. Mason didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He gently placed the blanket beside her, not on her. An offer, not a command. She stared at it, then looked at him. Then, slowly, pulled the blanket over her shoulders. For a long moment, they just sat there. Then she reached into her satchel and pulled out a piece of bark. She pressed it to the dirt, using her claw tip to draw. Mason leaned closer. She was drawing pictures again. This time, it was a child. A small figure with ears like hers, a smile. A hand reaching toward a flower. Then the next drawing, dark figures surrounding the child. Fire, smoke, screams drawn with jagged lines. Ella pointed to the child, then touched her own heart. Mason understood. That was her, and that was what happened. Her home had been attacked, burned. She had seen it, lived it, escaped it. Now she was alone. Mason looked at the drawing, then at her, and said softly, "You survived." She didn't know the word, but maybe she understood the tone. Then he reached into his own bag and pulled out something small, an old photograph. His crew, 3 people, laughing, covered in grease and dust. All human. Mason pointed to them. "Friends," he said, then tapped the photo. "Gone." Ayla tilted her head. Mason touched his chest. "Alone." Her eyes slowly softened. She pointed to herself, then to him. Both alone. Both lost. She reached out and touched the photo gently, then placed her drawing beside it in the dirt. 2 lives. 2 stories, side by side. Mason smiled, just a little. Then he stood and walked to the fire. He threw in a few dry branches. The flames came alive again, lighting the camp. He motioned for her to come back to the warmth. She hesitated, then stood. She limped a little, but she walked without fear this time. As she sat by the fire again, Mason handed her a wooden cup of warm water, not food, just something comforting. She took it. Her hands no longer shook. Then she looked at him and opened her mouth. "Friend," she said. The word was broken, strange in her accent, but clear. Mason's eyes widened. "Friend?" She nodded. He grinned. "Yes. Friend." The fire cracked. For the first time, she relaxed her shoulders. Then she looked up at the sky. The stars were bright, like scattered diamonds. She pointed at them and said a word in her own tongue. Mason repeated. Badly, she laughed, a real laugh. Light and short, but real. He laughed too, embarrassed. A small, strange moment, but it felt like something big. Hope. But just as they were beginning to relax, a sound echoed through the trees. A growl. Low, hungry, not close, but not far either. Ayla. Stiffened, Mason stood quickly and grabbed his spear. "Stay here," he said. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the look on his face. Danger. He stepped into the darkness, eyes sharp. Behind him, Ayla curled near the fire, her eyes wide again, but this time, they weren't full of fear for him. They were full of fear for him. Mason stood still at the edge of the trees. The growl came again. It wasn't deep like a bear or loud like a beast. It was soft and stretched, like something testing the air, with hunger, a whisper of danger, the kind of sound that made skin crawl. His grip tightened on the spear. Behind him, the fire flickered. He could feel Ayla's eyes watching from camp, but he didn't look back. If he did, whatever was out there might use it as a chance to strike. He took a step forward, then another. The jungle grew darker just beyond the glow of his campfire. Thick vines and wide leaves made it hard to see. His boots crunched quietly against broken twigs and soft dirt. A shadow moved behind a tree. Mason froze. He raised his spear slowly and whispered, "I see you." Silence. Then two yellow eyes blinked from the shadows. They were low to the ground, watching, waiting. But then, they disappeared. No attack. No sound. Gone. Mason stayed still for another full minute before slowly walking back to camp. Ayla was sitting by the fire, hugging her knees again. When she saw him, her face filled with silent questions. He shook his head. "It's gone." She relaxed a little, but not fully. Mason sat down across from her and looked at the forest. Something was hunting tonight. And it wasn't him. The next morning, Mason went out to check the perimeter. He found tracks, 3 clawed feet, deep prints, large, too big to be from Ayla's kind. He followed them for a while, then stopped. The tracks circled the camp, again and again. It had been watching, waiting. He returned quickly. Ayla was gathering small fruits and leaves near the fire, her limp still slowing her. When she saw his face, she tilted her head. He showed her the track he had sketched on a leaf. Her face turned pale. She whispered a word. Mason pointed to the drawing. "Danger?" She nodded. Then she reached for the dirt and drew quickly, a tall creature with teeth like knives. Then another figure, smaller, running. Then a third, her, hiding. She drew a mouth with blood dripping. Then she pointed to the word Mason had taught her, carnivore. He froze. She wasn't describing the beast from last night. She was remembering another one she had seen before. And when she looked at Mason again, her eyes asked a question. "Are you like them?" Mason's heart twisted. He shook his head, tapped his chest. "Me? Different." But she didn't look sure, and he couldn't blame her. That evening, Mason went out hunting again. He had no choice. His stomach was tight with hunger. There were no fruits he could eat like Ayla. She watched him leave with the spear in his hand and fear in her eyes. He returned an hour later with a small lizard creature. Not much meat, but enough for a meal. He placed it near the fire. But before cooking, he stopped. Ayla was watching, silent. He sighed and pulled out one of the fruits she liked from his bag. He placed it on a cloth and slid it toward her. Then he stood and walked away from the fire to cook, turning his back, giving her space. As the meat sizzled, Mason kept his eyes on the trees. But Ayla didn't run. She ate the fruit slowly, keeping her eyes on him. Later that night, when the food was done and the fire low again, she surprised him. She crawled near and sat closer than usual. Not too close, but closer than ever before. And then, she pointed at the stars. She said a word in her language. Mason repeated it. She giggled. He smiled. "Star?" She nodded. "Star." Then she pointed at his chest. "Carnivore," she said softly. He paused, then slowly shook his head. "Heart," he said, tapping his chest. "Not cruel," she thought, then tried. "Carnivore, heart, friend?" Mason smiled. "Yes, carnivore's heart can still be friend." She tilted her head. "Strange." "Yeah," he agreed. "Very strange." But the moment didn't last, because in the distance, another growl came, This one louder, closer. Mason stood again. The jungle was whispering. Something was coming. Ayla was gone. Mason woke before sunrise, expecting to find her curled up near the fire like the last few nights. But the blanket was empty, the spot still warm, but no sign of her. He stood quickly, eyes scanning the trees. No sound, no movement. Then, he saw it, her fruit pouch lying near the edge of camp, half empty. She had taken only what she could carry. Mason cursed under his breath. "Why did you run, Ayla?" The answer was simple. She was afraid of him, afraid of the growls, afraid of staying. But what she didn't know was that the jungle beyond, his camp, was worse. Ayla's bare feet moved fast over the forest floor. She winced with each step, her healing ankle slowing her down. Her breath came quick. Her heart beat like a drum inside her chest. The sounds of the forest grew louder the deeper she went. She thought she could hide, survive on fruits and roots, like before. She was wrong. Behind her, the jungle breathed with hunger. She stopped near a tall tree with glowing vines and pressed her back against it. Her sharp ears twitched. Something was moving. Close. A shadow darted through the ferns. She didn't wait to see what it was. She turned and ran again. Branches slapped her face. Thorns scratched her arms. Then, she stumbled. Her leg gave out. She rolled into a shallow ditch, mud soaking her clothes. She bit her lip, trying not to cry. But something was coming. She heard it breathing. Low. Wet. Hungry. She pressed herself to the earth, trembling. A heavy footstep landed just meters away. Then, another. The growl she had heard near the humans' camp now felt much closer. Real. Terrifying. She was going to die out here. Alone. Mason followed the trail fast. Broken leaves. Smudged prints. A patch of purple blood where she had fallen. He ran harder, pushing through branches, his spear ready. "Ayla!" he shouted into the trees. "Ayla!" No answer. But the forest was too quiet. The birds had gone. Even the bugs were still. And then, he heard it. A growl. Then a scream. Short. Sharp. Her. He ran toward the sound. Ayla tried to crawl backward as the shadow approached. The beast stepped into view. It had long legs, a thick neck, and teeth like stone blades. Its skin was dark and slimy, almost blending with the trees. Yellow eyes locked on her. It was smiling, like it knew she couldn't run. It raised a clawed hand, ready to strike. Then, thwack. A spear hit its side. The creature roared and turned. Mason charged out of the trees, eyes full of fire. Get away from her. He picked up a sharp rock and threw it hard. It struck the creature's jaw. The beast charged him now, fast and heavy. Mason dodged just in time, sliding across the wet ground. He grabbed his spear from the dirt and spun to face it. The creature roared again and lunged. Mason stabbed forward, the spear sinking deep into its side. Blood, thick and black, poured out. The beast screamed and ran off into the jungle, crashing. Through the trees like a storm. Mason didn't chase it. He turned to Ayla. She was curled up, eyes wide, chest heaving. He dropped to his knees beside her. "You're okay. I'm here." She shook her head, voice trembling. "I ran." He nodded. "I know. I thought I was safer alone. I thought that once too," he whispered. She looked at him, surprised. "I lost people too, Ayla. I know what alone feels like. It eats you from the inside." She didn't speak for a long moment, then she whispered, "You came." He smiled gently. "Always." Later, Mason built a fire in the open clearing. Ayla sat beside it, wrapped in a blanket again. Her body still trembled, but not from cold now, from what she'd seen, what nearly happened. She looked at him and said, "You are carnivore, but you protect." Mason nodded. She placed her hand over her heart. "So, Maybe you not like them. He chuckled. Maybe I'm not. Then he reached into his pouch and pulled out a small round object. It was old, dusty, but he had kept it safe, a whistle. He tied it to a cord and gently placed it around her neck. If you're scared again, blow this. I'll come. She held it in her fingers, staring. Then she did something new. Something surprising. She leaned forward and touched her forehead to his. A silent thank you. A new kind of trust. The jungle was quiet for 2 days. Too quiet. Mason knew this kind of silence. It wasn't peace. It was warning. The beast he had fought didn't return. But deep in the trees, something felt wrong. Even the wind moved carefully now. The birds didn't sing. The small creatures that used to rustle the leaves at night were gone. Something was watching. But for now, Mason stayed close to Ayla. He didn't leave camp. He built extra walls around their shelter. He sharpened more spears. He placed small traps, not to catch but to warn. Ayla watched everything he did, quiet, careful, but different now. She no longer flinched when he stepped close. She no longer pulled back when he handed her food or water. She followed him around camp, copying his movements, learning. And every time she looked at the whistle he'd tied around her neck, her eyes softened. One morning, as the sun pushed through the tree canopy, Mason sat carving a tool near the fire. Ayla sat across from him, holding a smooth rock in her hands. Suddenly she spoke. A single word. Friend. Mason looked up. He hadn't taught her that word recently. Not since the night she first said it, shy and broken. But this time it was different. This time her voice was clear, strong. He smiled. Yes, friend. She pointed to herself. Ayla, friend. Then pointed to him. Mason, friend. He chuckled. You're getting good at this. She tilted her head. Good? He nodded. Yes, learning fast. Her smile grew a little. Small, but real. Then she leaned forward and said softly, You speak with heart. Mason blinked. Heart? She nodded and tapped her chest. Not just words, heart. His smile faded into something deeper, something warm. He looked at her, this alien girl who had once feared him like a monster, and saw not a victim, not a burden, but a partner. Someone brave, someone trying. He stood and motioned for her to follow. Come on, I want to show you something. He led her to a high ridge above the forest. The climb was hard, but she kept up even with her weak leg. At the top, the trees opened to a wide view of the green world. Mountains in the distance, a silver river cutting through the jungle like a ribbon. The sky above was deep blue with two suns shining softly. Ayla gasped. Her hand went to her mouth. Beautiful. Mason grinned. That's your second word today. She laughed. It was soft and musical. Then she sat on the edge and stared at the view. Mason sat beside her. This world tried to kill us, he said. But it also gave us this. She looked at him. Pain and beauty. Together. He nodded. Exactly. They sat in silence for a long time, for once not afraid. But peace never lasted long on this planet. That night, just after the fire was lit, Mason stepped outside the camp to check his outer traps. He found one sprung, empty, but near it, blood fresh. Not his, not Ayla's. Something else had passed. He followed the drops until they disappeared into thick vines. Then he heard it, a faint snap behind him. He turned. Nothing. But his eyes narrowed. He wasn't alone. And whatever it was smart. Back at camp, Ayla waited. She cleaned a few fruits, her movement slow but practiced now. Then she noticed something, the whistle around her neck. It shook gently, not from her own motion but from the ground. A vibration. She stood quickly and scanned the trees. Her ears twitched. Then, silence. No bugs. No wind. Nothing. She grabbed a stick and backed toward the fire. Then she saw them. Eyes. Not one pair. 2. 3. Yellow. Watching. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She lifted the whistle to her lips, hands shaking, and blew. The sound cut through the jungle. Mason heard it. His heart dropped. He ran. He crashed through the brush and burst into camp. Ayla was standing near the fire, eyes locked on the trees. Then the first creature stepped forward. A second one followed, the same kind as the one he fought, but stronger, bigger. Mason moved in front of Ayla. Spear raised. No words now, only fire in his chest. You'll have to go through me. The beasts growled, circling. Ayla grabbed a burning stick from the fire and stood beside Mason. He looked at her, surprised. She was shaking but not hiding. Her voice came low and brave. Friend, together. The night burned with firelight and fear. 3 beasts circled the camp, yellow eyes glowing in the shadows. They growled low, hungry and patient. The same kind Mason had fought once, but this time they weren't wounded or alone. They were hunting, as a pack. Mason gripped his spear tight. His feet were planted, his body tense. Ayla stood at his side, holding a burning branch like a sword. Her small hands trembled, but her eyes didn't run. Not this time. Not anymore. The beasts stepped closer. 1. Lunged. Mason threw the spear with a grunt. It struck deep into the side of the lunging creature. The beast let out a painful screech and rolled to the ground. The other 2 growled louder, now angrier than before. The injured one limped away into the trees, but the other 2 remained. Mason stepped back. Ayla, run! But she didn't move. She grabbed another burning branch and threw it toward the closest predator. Boom! The dry leaves caught fire. A wall of flame rose for a moment. One of the beasts leapt back, startled. The firelight danced on its wet, scaly skin. Go! Mason shouted again, but Ayla shook her head. No, friend. Fight together. Mason's eyes widened. In that moment, he saw something in her. Strength. She was no longer just a scared alien girl. She was a survivor, and she had chosen to trust him. The battle lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. The second beast lunged at Mason, claws raised. He rolled, grabbed a sharpened bone from his belt and drove it into its neck. The creature screamed and fell. The third beast leapt toward Ayla. She screamed, but she didn't freeze. She held the burning branch up, and as it neared, she shoved the fire into its eyes. It backed off, snarling in pain, then fled into the trees. Silence fell. The fire crackled. Mason stood, chest rising fast, blood dripping from his arm. He turned. Ayla was on her knees, breathing hard but alive. He limped to her side and helped her up. You okay? She nodded slowly. Scared, but not alone. He smiled through the pain. You did it. She looked at the dark woods. We did it. The next morning, smoke rose into the sky, drifting above the trees like a quiet flag of survival. Mason and Ayla sat together near the fire. His wounds were bandaged. Her hair was messy, but her eyes were bright. She opened her pouch. Inside, a single rare fruit, round, orange, and glowing slightly. She held it out to him. Mason blinked. For me? She nodded. You protected me, gave fire, gave blanket, gave heart. He took the fruit carefully. It was warm in his hands. She smiled softly. This fruit is for trust. My people offer it only once. Mason paused. And you're giving it to me? She nodded again. Mason took a bite. It was sweet, strange, full of warmth, like the jungle itself had softened for a moment. He smiled. Thank you, Ayla. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Thank you, my friend. Later, they stood on the ridge again, overlooking the wild green planet. The air was fresh. Birds sang again. The forest breathed easier now that the beasts were gone. Mason looked at her. Ayla, I don't know if rescue is coming. She nodded. I know. but I don't think I care anymore." She looked up at him, curious. "I was lost before I met you," he said. "Now I have something real. Someone." She touched his hand gently. "Me too." They stood quietly as the suns rose together, their light warm and golden. Not hunter and prey, not human and alien. Just two souls who found each other in the darkest place and survived.